My name is Maya, I'm 29, and that evening I realized something was off in the smallest of ways. If you've ever faced something like this, comment where you're reading from. The office had already thinned out, desks glowing with the residue of monitors on sleep mode, the faint hum of the HVAC running too cold as usual, a stale smell of burnt espresso grounds clinging near the kitchen nook. I was wrapping my scarf around my neck when my eye caught the corner of the printer tray. A stack of pages was left behind, slightly askew, with a yellow sticky note stuck to the top. I wasn't snooping, I was just straightening them so they wouldn't fall. But the header on the first page froze me. Q4 Project Summary, Lead, Coworker's name. My breath slowed. That was my project. I had led every meeting, drawn every flow chart, negotiated every vendor call. Yet there it was, in clean black Arial font, credit belonging to someone else. I rubbed the paper between my fingers, the toner still faintly warm, my thumb catching the jagged edge where the guillotine had cut the stack. For a second, I told myself it must be a mistake, maybe the formatting tool autofilled the wrong name. But my gut knew better. The silence of the office pressed in. Out of habit, I checked the wall clock above the glass conference room, 7:42 p.m. I should have been gone an hour ago, but something kept me pinned to the carpet. I set the papers back exactly as I'd found them, slipped my phone from my coat pocket, and tapped the camera. One click. A photo of the top page with the date, my coworker's name bold in the byline. A little insurance, though I still wasn't sure against what. Walking out into the corridor, the lights flickered once overhead, the way they always did after 8 hours of buzzing. My reflection in the glass wall looked both sharper and more tired than I wanted to admit, shoulders tense, lips pressed thin. At that moment, I told myself it could be nothing. Maybe a draft, maybe a placeholder, maybe. But I carried the unease home like static on my coat. I didn't know yet that in 72 hours, that stack of papers would become the fulcrum of a battle I never thought I'd have to fight. The next morning I arrived earlier than usual, 8:07 a.m. The elevator still echoing with the metallic cough it made between floors. The office smelled of disinfectant and burnt dust from the overnight cleaning crew. I set my coffee down, paper cup, 12 ounces, the lid already sweating from the heat, on my desk near the window. At 8:23, my coworker strolled in, phone pressed to his ear, laughing a little too loudly. He tossed his jacket over the back of his chair, slid into it, and waved at me with the kind of careless ease you give someone you think you've already outmaneuvered. I kept my eyes on the spreadsheet in front of me, though my pulse had a steady drumbeat. I wanted to believe in coincidence, but then at 9:05, the email arrived. Subject line, Draft, Q4 Presentation, Review for Leadership. Sender, him. I opened it. 43 slides, neatly packaged. My diagrams, my vendor cost breakdown, my scheduling charts, all under his initials at the footer. I stared at the screen, jaw tight. I scrolled to slide 27, where the budget allocation showed the savings I'd wrung out after 6 tense calls with suppliers in October. Even the phrasing was mine, projected margin expansion of 4%. Across the aisle, he leaned back in his chair, sipping from a stainless steel bottle, chuckling again into his phone. I heard fragments, yeah, leadership's going to love it, yeah, my deck. I minimized the window before he could glance over and catch the expression on my face. My fingers traced the rim of my coffee cup, paper softening with condensation. A line etched itself across my thoughts, sharp and final, I won't do this anymore. I'd swallowed enough credit theft in smaller doses over the past year, offhand we instead of she in meetings, ideas repeated after I said them. But this was different. This was deliberate, documented, and on a scale that would shape my entire trajectory here. I clicked download and saved the file to a private folder on my desktop, timestamped. My hand shook a little when I slid my phone under the desk and snapped a quick photo of the subject line with the time in the corner. The hum of the office grew louder as more people filed in, chairs scraping, keyboards clattering. I straightened my posture, opened a new tab, and began typing notes. My plan wasn't clear yet, but I could feel its outline forming like a blueprint under tracing paper. I wasn't going to let this pass. I didn't land in this situation overnight. It built in layers, like sediment, each unnoticed slight settling until the weight pressed down too heavily to ignore. The first time had been small. Last December, in a Monday stand-up, I suggested a tweak to the client dashboard, color-coding overdue tasks. My coworker repeated it 2 minutes later, louder, and our manager nodded. That's clever. I let it slide. By March, it escalated. We'd co-presented at a vendor meeting, but he'd walked out with the handshake, leaving me to pack up stray cables and half-drunk water bottles. The vendor later emailed him directly, thanking him for the clear explanations. My name wasn't even copied. And then there was the bonus review in June. The numbers were there in black and white. I had delivered under budget and ahead of schedule. Yet my raise was a flat 3%. His was 6%. When I asked quietly, HR replied with the usual phrase, overall contributions. I'd walked home that evening with a blister on my heel from the cheap flats I couldn't afford to replace, my head pounding. Still, I stayed. I believed patience would win. I told myself good work speaks eventually. But the truth was, this company had become the axis of my survival. My rent, $1 for $50 a month, my student loan minimums, the health insurance that covered my mother's prescriptions. A missed promotion, a cut bonus, those weren't just professional disappointments. They were threats to my life's scaffolding. Now, staring at the stolen slide deck, the stakes clicked into focus. If he took credit for Q4, leadership wouldn't just applaud him. They would line him up for the January promotion, the very role I'd quietly prepared myself for, revising budgets late at night, tracking performance metrics. That role came with a $18,500 bonus and a salary lift that would finally allow me to pay off half my loans. I thought back to my father's voice from years ago, if you don't set the line, someone else will draw it for you. At 22, it sounded abstract. At 29, with rent due in 4 days and evidence in my inbox, it felt like law. The fluorescent lights above me buzzed faintly, one tube flickering like a nervous eye. I pressed my palm flat against the cool surface of my desk. Something had to give, and this time, it wasn't going to be me. The evidence found me faster than I expected. 2 days after I'd saved the deck, I was alone again in the office late, 9:11 p.m. The cleaning crew's vacuum thrummed faintly down the hall. I was reviewing supplier invoices when the printer across the aisle whirred to life. I hadn't sent anything to print. I glanced over. A stack slid out, page by page, crisp and hot. Curiosity tugged me out of my chair. The document bore the subject line I already knew too well, Q4 presentation, leadership version. The footer timestamp read November 14, 2047. My coworker must have sent it before leaving. This time, the front page had his name not only as lead but also in the acknowledgements section. Special thanks to, coworker's name, for innovation and direction. My stomach turned. I flipped the pages, fingers catching the warmth, static crackling. On slide 32, my cost-saving vendor negotiation appeared, identical phrasing, identical chart colors. I slid my phone out, screen lighting the dim aisle, and snapped shot after shot. Paper edges grazed my palm, toner smell sharp. I placed the stack back exactly, but not before slipping one duplicate page into my folder. My hand trembled as I folded it in half, then slid it inside a manila envelope I kept for receipts. Later that night, at my kitchen table, I flattened the page under the glow of a single lamp. The margins were wide and clean, the font unmistakable. I ran my nail down the footer, his initials, bold. I whispered aloud just to test the reality. Projected margin expansion of 7.4%. My own words. Mine. Scrolling back on my phone, I pulled up our Slack exchange from October 6 at 11:17 a.m. His message. Need you to handle the vendor calls, I'll circle back. And my reply. All 6 scheduled this week, I'll send the summaries. I printed that thread too, black ink on thin paper, the curl of it still warm as I set it on the pile. Looking at the growing folder, photos, printed chat, the stolen slide, I felt a click deep inside, like a gear locking into place. The evidence wasn't abstract anymore. It was tangible, touchable, undeniable. And with it, a decision crystallized. I make a choice. The next step was confirmation. I needed to be sure it wasn't just me seeing ghosts in toner. I booked a half-hour with our accountant, 11:30 a.m., conference room B, the one with the uneven blinds that always left a strip of sun cutting across the table. She was blunt, the type who didn't waste words. I slid the manila envelope across to her. Inside, the printed slide, the slack thread. She adjusted her glasses, flipped through, and then looked up. "You built this model?" "Yes." Every line. And he presented it as his? Draft for leadership. Credit shifted. She exhaled through her nose, tapping the paper with a pen. "Numbers don't lie. Whoever compiled this used your October supplier savings. That's not public until end of quarter. Only you had the raw files." The sun stripe warmed my wrist as she spoke. I felt both exposed and validated. "If this goes up without correction," she added, "leadership will assume he created the framework. That means bonus pool allocation, promotion ranking. The window closes fast, Q4 reviews finalize by December 10th. December 10th. 4 weeks. A hard deadline stamped itself into my mind like a countdown. I asked quietly if I brought this formally. She gave me a level stare. "You'll need more than suspicion. Documentation, clear sequence. Keep copies outside the company server." Her pen tapped once more before she slid the papers back. "You have something. But if you move soon." I left the room with the envelope clutched under my arm, paper edges biting through the thin fabric of my blouse. Outside, the office noise surged, phones ringing, keyboards clattering, someone laughing too loud near the kitchen. But it all felt muted compared to the sentence ringing in my head: bonus allocation, promotion ranking. I walked straight to my desk, opened a personal email draft, and uploaded the files, photos, chats, the duplicate slide, saving them as attachments in a draft folder only I could access. Insurance. The air from the vent above cooled the back of my neck, but inside I was burning with clarity. The timeline was no longer abstract. By December 10th, the story of my work would be sealed, either stolen or reclaimed. And I was done letting silence decide. The lever had to be precise. Not anger, not whispers. Paper. Process. On November 18th, 8:46 a.m., I walked into HR with a navy blue folder under my arm. The hallway smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and burnt coffee, the kind that sat too long in the breakroom pot. My palms were dry, not shaking. I'd rehearsed this moment in silence the night before. The HR manager motioned me to sit. Her office was small, 2 framed diplomas, and a rubber plant drooping in the corner. I set the folder on her desk, opened it, and slid out the pages. "These slides are from the Q4 deck submitted last week," I said evenly. She nodded. "These Slack threads are from October. They show delegation of the vendor work." Another nod. I kept my voice steady. All vendor calls, data analysis, and budget savings reflected in these slides were my work. The draft credits someone else's lead. She picked up the evidence, flipping page by page. The silence stretched. I could hear the faint tick of her wall clock, seconds crawling past. Finally, she asked, "Do you want to file a formal complaint?" "Yes." "With exhibits. Dated and signed." The procedure unfolded in clipped steps. She filled out the intake form, handwriting neat, date in the corner, November 18th, 2023. I signed the bottom line, black ink pressing hard enough to leave an imprint on the blotter. She stamped it received, a dull red mark bleeding through the paper. "Next step," she explained, "is review by the compliance officer. You may be asked to provide further documentation. He'll be notified, but without details at first." I nodded, slipping my pen back into my folder. The air felt denser, as if the walls themselves held the weight of what I'd just set in motion. That afternoon, across the aisle, my coworker's voice rose an octave during a phone call. He was pacing, water bottle in hand, words spilling too fast. "No, I don't know what this is about. They asked me for a meeting." I typed quietly, expression neutral, while my pulse tapped steady in my throat. For the first time, the balance shifted, not by shouting, not by accusation, but by structure, by ink. When he finally hung up, he sank into his chair, jaw tight, tapping the bottle against his knee. I didn't look at him. I just underlined a note in my planner: complaint filed. Case number 427B. On the other side of the aisle, silence settled like a quiet shock. The consequences didn't explode, they spread like ripples. By Monday, November 20th, the tone in the office shifted. He still came in at 9:15 sharp, still tossed his jacket over the chair. But his laugh was tighter, shorter, clipped at the edges. He stopped calling the Q4 deck his. In meetings, he leaned back, arms crossed, watching instead of leading. At 2:04 p.m. that day, I was summoned to a short compliance interview. Neutral conference room, glass walls, the faint buzz of the air vent overhead. The officer clicked his pen once and asked only for sequence, dates, files, who delegated what. I laid it out: October 6th delegation in Slack, October 9th vendor calls, October 15th cost analysis summary, November 14th deck with his name. I handed over the folder. He slid it into a larger file without comment. The next morning, my manager stopped by my desk. He rested one hand on the divider wall, tone unusually careful. "Your numbers in the Q4 summary, very sharp." I looked up, neutral. "Thank you." He hesitated, then moved on. It was a small line, but it was the first public acknowledgement in weeks. By Thanksgiving week, the practical effects surfaced. Leadership scheduled a review meeting, December 4th, final call before year-end promotions. And I was officially listed as primary presenter. The invite came through at 11:37 a.m. I read it twice, then 3 times, letting the fact settle. Still, I didn't gloat. At lunch that same day, he sat 2 tables away in the cafeteria, stabbing at his salad, phone screen lighting his face. His usual cluster of allies avoided eye contact. The hum of conversation filled the space, but around him there was a pocket of quiet. That evening, I called my mother. I told her, simply, I filed a complaint. They're reviewing it. Her reply was steady. You did the work. Don't apologize for protecting it. For the first time in months, I slept through the night, no jolting awake at 3 a.m., no mental replay of stolen credit. It wasn't victory yet, but it was oxygen. A first breath after holding it too long. The countermove came quietly, as I knew it would. On November 28th, for 12 p.m., my inbox pinged with a forwarded email. He had written to leadership, copying HR, subject line, clarification on project roles. The body was short, polished, almost lawyerly. While Maya handled supplier communications, I maintained oversight and directed strategy. The deck reflects my leadership role. Any misattribution was unintentional. I read it twice. The implication was clear: diminish my work to communications, elevate his to strategy. A neat reframing, designed to muddy water. I leaned back in my chair, fluorescent light buzzing overhead, and breathed through the first wave of heat rising in my chest. Then I reached for the folder. Because I hadn't just kept slides and chats. I had kept the calendar invites. On October 12th, he declined the strategy session, his exact response in the invite: can't attend, traveling. On October 17th, my summary email had gone out, subject line, vendor strategy recap. Attached, the model. To him. His reply at 10:41 a.m. had been one line: looks good, proceed. I printed both pieces, slipped them into a clear sleeve, and walked them straight to HR. The smell of toner still clung to the paper when I handed it over. The compliance officer looked down, scanned, then nodded once. This seals the sequence. Thank you. That evening, as I packed my laptop, he approached my desk for the first time in weeks. His voice was low, strained. You didn't have to escalate this. I zipped my bag calmly. I documented what I did. That's all. He opened his mouth, closed it, then walked away, bottle swinging in his hand. I stood there, coat half-buttoned, feeling the final click of clarity. There was no way back to blurred lines, to letting oversight erase hours of work. The gap between my contribution and his claim had been closed, sealed with timestamps and replies that carried his own words. The truth was on record now, not up for interpretation. And I was steady, ready for what December would bring. December moved quickly, the way end-of-year months always do: budget closings, holiday parties, half-packed calendars. On December 4th at 9 a.m., I stood in the glass-walled conference room with leadership lined up along one side of the table. My slides projected clean against the wall. I presented vendor calls, savings, margin expansion of 7.4%, projected Q1 rollout. My voice was steady, no rush, no tremor. When the room fell quiet after the final chart, I let the silence sit. Then came the nods. The questions. The approvals. No one asked who led the work. They already knew. The promotion memo arrived a week later, December 11th. Title change. Salary increase. Bonus, $18,500. I read the email in the quiet of my apartment, the radiator hissing in the corner, my tea cooling on the windowsill. I didn't cry or cheer. I just let the stillness hold me. Boundaries now are not about him, they're about me. I don't take late-night favor tasks that belong elsewhere. I document everything: meeting notes, decisions, timestamps. My blue folder sits on the shelf above my desk, a quiet reminder of where silence ends and action begins. When he passes me in the office, we nod. Nothing more. I don't owe warmth, explanation, or rehearsal of the past. My work speaks, and I let it. In the evenings, I walk home a different route, past a bakery that smells of yeast and sugar, down a block strung with yellow holiday lights. The city feels less like a cage and more like air. 3 to 6 months from now, I'll have the loans half paid. I've started looking at night classes in data analytics, a skill set that widens doors. Choices feel tangible now, not like far-off hypotheticals. Tonight, I close my laptop at 6:02 p.m., slip it into my bag, and shut off the desk lamp. My reflection in the dark office glass is calm. Upright. Mine. And for the first time in years, I leave without carrying someone else's shadow on my shoulders.